Welcome to TSNN's live webinar series. Today's webinar will cover the intriguing topic of securing your event's digital data. Our expert moderator and panelist will answer questions the last 15 minutes of our webinar, so please join in. Alternatively, you can join the conversation and ask questions on Twitter at #TSNNwebinar anytime. Now, Arlene Shows, Marketing Manager for TSNN, would like to say a few words.
Hello from everyone at TSNN and welcome. As usual, regarding TSNN's educational webinar series, we are grateful to offer our audience such amazing industry experts when we dive into topics of high importance. Today, we are especially fortunate to offer our audience expertise surrounding a hot topic which affects every show, meeting, conference, and event, securing your event's digital data. So thanks for tuning in. Appreciations to our devoted sponsors, Signature Boston, MCCA, and OnStream Media. They continue to help us deliver these educational topics to you free of charge. All TSNN webinars are brought to you by OnStream Media, the leader in multimedia webinar and webcasting services. OnStream Media is a leading online service provider of corporate audio and web communications, including webinar and webcasting services. OnStream Media's innovative webinar platform, Visual Webcaster 4.0, allows event managers to easily produce, schedule, and invite attendees to highly interactive, live, and on-demand webinars that can be accessed via a desktop or mobile device. No downloads are ever required, and the solution can scale to support tens of thousands of attendees. The platform has been ranked #1 by top 10 reviews and is being used to power today's event. To learn more about OnStream's products, please visit onstreammedia.com. Another round of thanks goes out to Signature Boston and the Massachusetts Convention Center Authority. They own and operate the Boston Convention and Exhibition Center and the Heinz Convention Center. Boston certainly represents unique benefits and advantages of bringing an event there, including state-of-the-art facilities, first-class hotels, unique history, culture, and top-notch services, including free Wi-Fi throughout the entire BCEC and the Heinz. Now, before we get started, I just quickly wanted to point out a handy free tool TSNN has created for our industry professionals, especially when you're super, super busy. It's the TSNN Trade Show Venue Directory. It's the only extensive online U.S. trade show venue directory with more than 400 exhibit halls, convention centers, and other facilities with exhibit space listed. It's complimentary to all users and is a comprehensive guide designed to assist trade show organizers, meetings, and event planners to find the perfect venue for their events. You just have to visit tsnn.com and click the venue directory bar on the right-hand side of our homepage. Now allow me to introduce our moderator today, Michelle Bruno, an event industry blogger, technology journalist, publisher of the Event Tech Brief e-newsletter, and one of the judges of the EIB-TM Technology Watch competition. I can't wait to learn about this topic, Michelle, so let's dive in and get started.
Thank you so much, Arlene, and welcome, Michael. I wanted to introduce first our guest today. There's just far too much in your bio, Michael, to list in a paltry slide, but I wanted everyone to know where you're coming from when you're giving us advice about cybersecurity and data protection and things like that. So I want the audience to know that Michael is currently a cyber threat analyst and forensic investigator for a large international company. He was a former senior digital forensic examiner in the U.S. intelligence community, and prior to that, he performed computer forensic examinations for the FBI's investigative analysis unit, assisting special agents with counterintelligence and criminal cases. Michael is the former CIO of the U.S. Department of Defense's Business Transformation Agency, where he oversaw all information technology and information assurance operations for the agency, including overseeing all incident response and forensic investigations. He is now an adjunct professor at Stevenson University and George Mason University, where he teaches graduate courses in computer forensics, mobile device forensics, intrusion analysis, and cyber warfare. And before we get going with the long list of questions, Michael, I kind of have a personal question, and that is, are people attracted to you or afraid of you at cocktail parties?
You know, one, thanks for having me, but two, whenever I show up at cocktail parties and people ask me what I do, I usually get that look of fear, and people usually clutch their phones a little tighter, and it just makes them a little nervous. And every time I go out and when I speak at events, there's always someone in the audience who comes up to me and says, "Here, you can just have my phone now. I quit. I'm going to go live in a cave."
Yeah, and I'm thinking about doing that myself after talking to you. But in any case, we're gonna power through, and by the end of this presentation, we will have hopefully given the audience an overview of the event security landscape. We're going to talk about vulnerabilities in some very specific technologies and areas, talk about remedies for specific threats, and talk overall about a security posture for event organizers and suppliers. So we're going to kind of start out diving in with the questions as soon as the slide changes. Takes 1 second. There we go. So what do we have to worry about here? From a data protection perspective, how safe are events, Michael?
You know, that's a great question. And frankly, events, just by their very setup, because they're so open and they have so many people attending, are not very secure. Data security and event security doesn't happen by accident. If we're not planning for it and incorporating it from the time we start setting up our events, we shouldn't expect that we will be safe during the events. And just because we don't necessarily see a cyber attack happening doesn't mean we're secure. A lot of times they happen in the background and we don't know it.
So, talking about some specific areas and components, I want to know, there's one thing that you talked about when I've seen you speaking online and read about it. This thing, it's an object, it's a device called a pineapple router. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what that is and also define for us man-in-the-middle attacks.
Sure. We have wireless capability at all of our events. And guests wouldn't think of attending an event at a conference center or a hotel if they couldn't still be connected back to their home office. Right? Everyone lives on their cell phone, they live on their laptops, they live on their tablets, and they expect Wi-Fi to be used. And they walk into events and they hook up to Starbucks Wi-Fi or they hook up to the conference center's Wi-Fi, and they just expect internet connectivity. And they will send emails, text messages, make phone calls, and send all of this data, some of it being sensitive data, across the air. And unfortunately, there are bad people in the world. There are bad people who want that information, right? When you have a great event and you have 1,000 people all geared into one particular industry, that becomes a target. And what happens is someone like me or someone with a skill set similar to mine shows up and says, I can intercept all of that wireless traffic and you would never know it. And they do that with a little device called a pineapple router. It's about the size of the palm of your hand. And it sits with a little battery pack, and you can put it in your back or underneath a table or off to the side. And what it will do is it will automatically impersonate any wireless network. So what happens is when you connect to the conference facility or when you go to Starbucks and you connect to a plain network, this little guy is designed to say, yes, I am that network. And when your devices automatically pair, the wireless signal goes out and it'll get asked the question, are you ATT Wi-Fi? And this little guy says, yes. Wait a second, are you my home network? Yes. Are you the public library? Yes. Are you McDonald's? Yes. Are you the conference? Yes. And it'll automatically pair and associate it. And your phone, your laptop, and your tablet do not know the difference between a legitimate wireless network and this little guy that's impersonating. Which means when this guy intercepts all of the traffic, it can sniff and watch all of the traffic as it goes by, whether there's usernames, passwords, sensitive email, contract information, you name it. And typically what happens is they operate in a very passive mode. And unless you're watching for these little devices, you'll never know if someone stands one up at your event. And all of this traffic comes back and forth. What's really scary is when traffic comes and goes. Maybe someone does online banking or very quickly pays a credit card or processes processes an expense report, this little guy will say, ooh, that's nice data. I'm going to grab it as it goes across the air, and I'm going to intercept it and change it. And now we have someone who acts as a man in the middle. Imagine what would happen if your letter carrier, for those 2 or 3 people out there who still send mail, snail mail, imagine what would happen if your letter carrier could open up your mail, change values, and send it on their way. What would happen if we could change bag numbers, amounts, credit card information, billing receipts, and we could start sending data somewhere else? We trust the mail, right, because it's sealed, and the post office doesn't open it. But when it comes to wireless data, all of a sudden we have people who have the ability to grab and steal that information, which is kind of scary.
So what's big in this industry, obviously you know this, is event mobile apps. And I want you to first talk about the vulnerabilities around event mobile apps and also what the organizers should do just from the get-go. We'll talk later about some specific things that the app providers can do.
Okay. So as we build and plan events, we love interaction with our attendees. It makes for a great personal experience, right? We want people to get feedback. We want them to participate in surveys. We want them to network with one another. Hey, everyone's going out afterwards, people going to sessions, and we like to push out custom mobile apps to really enhance our experience. There's a downside to that, because as we engage in app development for mobile devices, we push them out pretty fast in a matter of days or weeks. And the problem we have with that is sometimes those apps are going to have sensitive information. And if you have someone like me who's going to take that app and crack it open and start reading all of the data, I'm going to steal as much information about all of your attendees as possible. And it's an amazing thing. So when we start social networking, we have usernames, then we have contact information that people are willing to share, because ours is an industry where people have to network. That's how we get a lot of things done. The problem is, if I can steal people's names, titles, mailing addresses, corporation names, email addresses, I have all of this contact information, and I can start making phishing emails, bogus emails that are designed to look legitimate, and I can start targeting all of your attendees. And if any of this stuff connects to a back-end system where people register, for all of your events, and they provide sensitive information, maybe they pay credit card fees, I'm going to steal all of that information too. So when we talk about mobile apps, we have to start talking about how are we going to protect the data that's there? What do we want our attendees to share? And if someone with bad intent gets that, what are they going to learn? What are they going to steal? When we start using mobile apps, we should be asking our developers some basic questions. Hey, is the database that you're storing on the phone, is it encrypted? Do people have to log in with a name and password, or is it just an email address? When these apps send data back and forth to the network and the internet, does it automatically encrypt that traffic so I don't have to worry about bad guys with pineapple routers? Bad people like that Michael Robinson who's sitting over there playing on his laptop. What could he be doing? Right? We should be asking these questions at the very beginning when we set this up, because in our race to provide that personable electronic experience, we also have the obligation to make sure that we provide an infrastructure that's relatively secure.
So, Michael, I want to drill down a little bit more. We received lots of questions from mobile app developers regarding data security issues. So the first one was around, do you have any idea about the percentages of accounts, user accounts, that are either spoofed, invalid, or duplicated?
That's a good question. So what will happen is there have been events, and more often than not, they are technical events, where email addresses and names and accounts are stolen. And what happens is they steal it for nearly every attendee that's there. And I have been at 2 or 3 events where it's come out afterwards that several hundred accounts were stolen. And there was a recent, tech conference in Europe where someone wanted to promote security, so he decided to turn on a pineapple router, steal everyone's IDs, and share at the end, hey, I have 1,000 names. But we are now starting to see events, big events, where people are stealing millions of addresses where we steal all of the contact database. And unfortunately, it's so underreported because, one, we don't always know when it happens until well after the fact. And two, people don't share that information. No one likes to air their dirty laundry. So I think it's a statistic that's well underreported, but we know that it's occurring at different events. It's starting in tech industry, but it's moving to larger areas. So we're seeing it more and more. One of the scary things that shows up is, and this is a great question for event planners and organizers, if you were to see me coming, I would be wearing a jacket, a blue Oxford, pair of khakis. I would look like any attendee at your event. I'm clean cut. I have glasses. I carry a small backpack with a laptop and a phone, and I look like anyone else. How would you know if I was stealing your information? You probably wouldn't. I've gone up to events and I've actually asked people, wow, I can't hook up to the network. Can you help me? Sure, I'd love to help you. And they facilitate the ability for me to steal stuff. We know people social engineer their ways into events, right? They don't want to pay for it. But we also know that people social engineer their way into stealing data, electronic information. So it's happening more and more.
So once an attendee's information is compromised, is there anything an organization can do after that?
That's a scary thing. So what do we do once the horse has left the barn? Well, there's a couple things we can do. One, we have to know what information's been compromised. Two, we also have to let people know that their data has been taken. Hi, we want to let you know that your name, your email address, and your corporation name has been taken. You might be subject to phishing attacks. Hey, we know that your credit card information is done. It should also prepare us to store that information more securely in the future. Our reputation is at stake. The first time we host an event and all of a sudden it's hacked, people will remember, oh, yeah, that's the event where people stole all of my information. I don't want to go back to them. I don't trust them anymore. I'll go to one of their competitors' events or I won't show up at all. So one, we have to protect our reputation, and usually that's done through honesty, and we're straightforward. But two, we should also let them know that, hey, we are encrypting your information. We are only storing the information that we need. We love to grab analytics in this industry. We do. We want to learn everything about our attendees because we want to be better at providing services to them. The problem is the more data we gather, the more of a target we are. So we have to be careful about what we're going to grab and why. We should be able to articulate what it is we're doing.
So a lot of mobile apps require passwords, and most of us attendees forget them. So what's a better process for resetting passwords other than lost password or some sort of human-based password reset process?
Wow, what an awesome question. So everyone tells you that you should have separate passwords for every application where you log in, and frankly, I can't remember them all. So all of a sudden I start doing silly things like I start reusing passwords over and over and over. And sometimes I will have to go reset my password. And we've designed it so we don't have to interact with people anymore. Right? We've set it up so that when we forget our passwords on Facebook or on LinkedIn or on these apps, we just have to answer several security questions and we can reset our password. For example, I forget my password. Maybe it's going to say, where did you go to high school? What city did you grow up in? What's your mother's maiden name? This is all information we can learn about each other if we log into LinkedIn or Facebook. I can go profile Michelle Bruno. I can learn all about her history because she has shared that. And I will just list all that information. It'll take me about 5 to 10 minutes to gather it. And I will just go click on one of those links that says, oh, look, I forgot my password. Please answer the security questions. Oh, what's the name of my dog? Well, that's funny. She has a picture of her dog, Fido, on Facebook. I now know Fido's name. Where did she go to high school? Oh, look, I can see all of her friends. A core group, they all went to high school together, so I can start answering these questions. And I can reset the password and get access to her account as her. But what do we do? More and more, we should be using two-factor authentication. I know it's available through Apple's iCloud. I know it's available on Gmail. And that requires us not just to know those security questions, but it requires us to know the password, the security question, so we can reset it, but also be in possession of something like our cell phone so we can respond to a text message. It's that extra level of security where we will be in possession of something. It's not perfect, but it's a lot better off than just answering generic security questions to get in. We've made it much too easy for us to be self-serviced individuals.
Mm-hmm. So talk about social sign-on. And is that risky, or are there ways to minimize the risk?
You know what? We are in a mad dash right off the cliff. We are running as fast as we can like lemmings. And we do this because we want to make things easy for people. People don't want to remember user IDs and passwords, so we're going to allow people to log in through Facebook. We're going to allow them to log into Gmail. Right? And that way they only have to worry about one set of credentials. The bad thing with having one set of credentials, once I get that one set of credentials, I can get into all those different systems for you. And we have to be careful with that. We should also know that, hey, everything hinges on that one set of credentials. So if I don't protect that information, anyone can get in. So while it's very useful for us as a feature, and we like that, it comes with a set of risks at the exact same time. We should know that if that becomes compromised, all of these dependent social single sign-ons become compromised as well. So let me ask you a question. When's the last time you reset your Facebook password? Have you ever? Since you originally set it up? Have you gone in and reviewed your security policies? Have you changed the answers to questions? I mean, have you done any of these things? And most people are like, wow, you know, I haven't changed it since I set up Facebook all the way back in 2004. It's something we might want to consider.
From the app provider side, what is appropriate when an organizer asks them, can I see your security process documents? What's appropriate? What's kind of stepping over the line for an organizer, and how should an app provider respond to that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, we run into situations all the time in this industry where, and by this industry I'm talking about the computer security industry more than the event industry, where people ask the questions, are you protecting my information? Are you protecting my data? And the answer is yes. And then all of a sudden we should be asking the follow-up question, well, how? Give me a high-level description of what it is you're doing. I don't need to know the nitpicky details. I'm not a programmer. I'm not a security guy. But give me some level of confidence that you're doing it. We should be asking our third-party vendors, our business partners, how are you protecting me? Just so I know. Right? And they should be able to come back at a higher level and say, you know what we're doing? We're applying encryption in this place. We're making sure your traffic is secure. We're making sure that our developers turn in all of their code and they don't share it on the internet. We make sure that we follow the following business practices. If our third parties are afraid to tell us how they're protecting things, we should stop and say why. We should never hear back from a vendor and say, whoa, 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 whoa. You want to know how we're protecting stuff? You just leave that to us. We don't want to share that with you. We could compromise our security. I don't know of anyone in the computer security industry who is using such a novel technique that's so business proprietary that they can't share it. Right? Your banking industry and your credit card industry come back and they tell you, you know what, we're using encryption. We're using state-of-the-art encryption. We're using the following encryption algorithms. And if you wanted to look them up, you could, right? We're using AES, whatever that might stand for. But the idea is we know that there are certain published standards that people adhere to. And if our vendors aren't prepared to share that, we might want to say, you know, you have to give me some reason why I should have some sense of trust in what it is you're doing. I'm paying you a decent amount of money. You are returning the work product, for which we are very appreciative. But we're no longer in a spot anymore where we can trust that. Because if there is a breach or there is a problem, you can bet people get cranky fast. One, it costs us our reputation, and two, it costs us money. Right? If we lost, you know, let's say we ran an event that had 6,000 attendees, and it was a big tech forum, and it had the head of large corporations show up, like the head of HP, the head of IBM, the head of Apple. Like, that would be a great event. I mean, you would have thousands of people wanting to show up to hear all these people. And if we lost their information, you can bet people would say, hey, wait a second, what have you done to protect it? We can't stop and say, well, I don't know, I trusted the vendor, and they wouldn't share it with us. Because push will come to shove, people will say, I would like to see what you've done. I would like to see what's stated in your contract. What did you require of them? right? And the buck will stop somewhere. And wherever that thing stops, it's going to be very expensive and very painful for that individual.
So feel free to tweet your fears about what Michael's saying. Anyway, moving on to the next question. Talk about wireless networks. This is such a huge thing for events. And what organizers should do about securing wireless networks, especially when they have very little control over it.
Yeah, you know, we love wireless. We are no longer tethered, and our employers love wireless because we can work around the clock. We work at home, we're working out, and the problem is we're on wireless networks, and we're not doing our best to secure them. The first thing is, a lot of times I have gone to conferences where they will share the password for the network right up there on the wall. They will make it clear for every attendee, this is our password, and they will post it on all the literature, and they will post it in the hallways when you walk in. And the idea is if we all share the same password through our networks, and that's what we are using for encryption, I can tell you that a bad guy, when he has the same password for encryption as you, he can decrypt all of your traffic, all of it. Right? So we restrict access to the network, but we shouldn't believe that that is the greatest thing in security. What we should be doing is, yeah, we restrict access to the network. Here is the password. We are going to change it every day that we have our conference. But we should also trust that our applications underneath, we should be using encrypted tunnels. We should love the idea of a tunnel inside a tunnel. So if people do sniff the traffic, our individual apps, our individual VPNs are all encrypted. So we should be trusting that on Wi-Fi. The other thing we should recognize is our mobile devices are designed to make life easy for us, and they will automatically reconnect to wireless networks that we've connected to in the past. For example, if you're one of those people who goes into Starbucks, you might know that Starbucks' wireless network is called AT&T Wi-Fi. They have a partnership with AT&T to provide wireless service to people. So when you're in line, you're surfing the net, and the idea is your phone will automatically reconnect to AT&T Wi-Fi whenever it sees a wireless access point with that exact same name. And I might go to Hilton, I might go to the Sheraton, I might go to the Westin, I might go to any guest network, and I hook on them for free. But the idea is when I leave those hotels, I should go into my phone and I should get rid of those stored networks so I don't automatically reconnect to them. I don't want to save that preference because you can always re-add it later, but the more that we add and leave on our list, the more likely we are to go pair to a network when we don't need to. And once we do, someone is going to start stealing our traffic. So we have to trade off that whole risk and convenience. I think we should make things just a little bit more manual for us. We should stop and think a little bit about, hey, do I want to reconnect to these networks or not? It only takes us a second or two. It's enough for us to turn off that feature. But we should know that tablets, laptops, and phones are automatically designed to reconnect, and that works against us when it starts to come to security. So wireless networks are a very tough thing to protect. The other thing that we really have to worry about is if we go to a convention center or a hotel or a meeting space, there might be local IT guys. And those local IT guys are watching everything that occurs maybe inside the network. Okay. But they're not monitoring anything outside their network. They're not monitoring for me when I stand up my own antenna and my own router and I impersonate the legitimate network. They're only concerned about stuff that they see on the inside. But they're not protecting or monitoring the network. The other thing that we should be very careful about is when we sign contracts, they guarantee us certain bandwidth. Are we monitoring that to make sure we get what we pay for? If they promise us 5 megabits per second per user, how are we ensuring that they provide us the right quality of service? If they degrade for a bit, our guests will notice, but we're still paying. How are we making sure that we get what we pay for? The other thing we have to be very careful on wireless networks is it's extremely easy to jam them. I know it's illegal, right? We would never think someone would engage in doing something like that. But we can take a little box, we can turn it on, and it will flood the area so no one can use the wireless network, no one can use Bluetooth, no one can use wireless mics, and no one can use a radio. How badly would your conference experience suffer if all of a sudden you lost all wireless connectivity You couldn't use wireless microphones. You couldn't use Bluetooth anymore to advance slides. Welcome back to the Stone Age. Imagine going from 2015 to now having to use technology for 1975. Are you prepared to do that? So we have to be careful about our use of wireless networks because we will have to defend them and secure them. Does that help a little?
Yeah. So from the venue side, what should they be providing to organizers to sort of demonstrate that they understand that and that they're prepared, they've taken measures to secure the network?
Oh, that's a great question, because we walk in and we automatically assume, hey, can you provide me enough bandwidth? And they say, yes, you will have, whatever the little buzzword, we will give you 25 megabits, we will give you 25 gigabits, and you'll be like, that's great. But we should also go back and say, hey, are you monitoring your space to make sure no one turns up a wireless network that's not yours? And more often than not, you'll get the question, no. How would we do that? Right? Are you monitoring the space to make sure no one turns on a fake cell phone tower that's going to intercept text messages and phone calls? That's very scary, because most organizations don't know how to do that. Are you monitoring the space to make sure no one turns on a cell phone jammer or a wireless jammer? There was a conference recently, and I think it was this past May, where the former head of NSA went to present. And within 2 minutes of him taking the stage, internet connectivity to that event stopped. He was, the third speaker of the day? Everything was fine until he took the stage, and all of a sudden there was an internet outage. That was not by accident. That was planned, right? People weren't happy with what General Keith Alexander had been doing at NSA, so therefore, it was announced that he was going out, so therefore we considered it great press. People who don't like him saw the information and said, I can make his life a little bit more miserable. Right? So we have to be careful and watch this stuff. And we have to ask our audience, right? Physical security, the big guys with guards with really big necks who stand at the door in their jackets, like you're really good at looking for suspicious people who are going to be physical problems, right? Protesters. But those are not the guys who are designed to protect our wireless networks. Those are not the guys who can handle cellular networks. Most of the local IT shops are not designed to handle that. I've been to smaller venues where the local IT person had a problem, and he goes, well, we have one person on site, and we have someone else that we contract out to. He can be here in 3 hours. I'm sorry, my conference only runs for the next 2 hours. That's not going to help me solve the problem you're having right now. What do we do? Right? So we have to make sure that we have the right people and staff to monitor and defend what's going on. And then the next step, it's even more of a challenge, and it can be done, because I've actually seen it and witnessed it. We can actually get the right equipment to target these bad people so we can find out, hey, he's sitting all the way over there in the corner. My sensor can pick it up. Let me walk over there and find out what's going on. And then I take the guys with really big necks and really big jackets, and I say, he is a problem. Could you go outside and ask him what the problem is? I don't tackle people. I'm way too small. So I get these guys to do that for me. And they are like, sir, could you come with me? And when I have picked off people who have been, a lot of times they're bored. Tech people, when they're bored, it's like having little kids. They can't help themselves but get into trouble. Right? I have picked off these people who have been interfering with the network. And when I got to about 8 feet from them, the individual looked up, he saw me coming, and he very quickly grabbed his bag, and I'm like, hi, how you doing? Fine. Can I see your equipment, please? What equipment? I'm like, this isn't going to end well for you. I need you to turn it off. And the answer I got was, okay. I'm like, great. And it was very quickly. These people know that when they're caught, it's usually not going to end well, at which point they give up everything. It's a matter of catching them in the first time.
Boy, we used to worry about people picketing events. Now we've got a whole other thing to worry about. So you told me that you've actually witnessed someone hacking a registration kiosk. How does that work, and what can organizers do about it?
Okay, so we have people who we want to sign people in as quick as possible to the event. We don't want it to be a problem. So we have stood up these kiosks so people can, again, go through this self-service where they type in their information and away they go, because we either have laptops or these little standalone machines. And the problem is you get people who have too much brains for their own good, and they will try to break the kiosk. They will put in bad information. If they find a USB port, they'll plug in a flash drive. If they can get around the user screen that you type in your data on and get root access to the system or system administrative access to the system, they're going to steal your data. They're going to copy it to a flash drive, or they're going to push it out to the internet. And they will start, tapping on the screen. And I've gone up to a kiosk and I've looked, and I had someone come up to me, "Sir, do you need help?" "No, I just have to type in all this information. I'll pull out my credit card in a second." They're like, "Oh, okay, if you need anything, we'll be back." And the person went away and left me be. And I start tapping on the help feature. I start banging on the space bar. I start putting in funny characters where the name goes. And it was just to look. And I'm like, wow, I can actually get into the system and see all of the registrants on the system. Oh, look, they're all networked together. I can get access to the database. And I can start stealing all of that data. A lot of times there will be USB ports sitting on these machines, and it's not too hard to plug in a keylogger, a small app, or a widget, put it right into the USB port, and away I go, and I take all of that data, which is a very scary thing. We have to protect all of the entry points of where we can connect to the network. We have to protect that web registration page that we set up on the website, because if I can fake it, we're going to have a problem. If your guests are staying in the hotel because we love to fill room blocks, I can go up, stand up my own little wireless network, I can impersonate the hotel, and I can set up a registration page where I ask for your name, I ask for your room ID. I can charge all sorts of things to your room at that point. I can put up a fake website that says, "Oh, you want wireless access to the network? No problem, it's free. Just give me your name, give me the last 4 digits of your credit card, and give me your room ID." And away you go. And people provide that. So we can steal all of that information from kiosks as well as from the registration web pages we set up at events.
You talked a little bit about cellular networks, that someone can erect a tower and intercept text messages and calls and things like that. Is there anything else that can happen, and are there other vulnerabilities around cellular networks? And what do you do about it?
There's a whole bunch. So the first thing we have to recognize, and this is probably the most scary aspect of all of this, hacking and stealing information has been professionalized. People are paid to steal data. They really are. And it happens a lot in Europe, and it happens in the U.S., and we think that that's bad and it shouldn't happen, but they do. It's been professionalized. This is what people do for a living. In terms of cell phone towers, the price of a piece of equipment that can broadcast and intercept cellular traffic, all the stuff coming and going from your cell phone, has gone from about $3,000 down to about $1,000. So for $1,000, I can buy something that acts just like a cell phone tower. It's not a big piece of equipment. It's small. It's about the size of a tablet, like an iPad. And I just plug it into a laptop. And this little cellular piece of equipment has 2 little antennas. And with that, I can start to intercept text messages, phone numbers, and account information for your cell phone. And I can start listening to certain phone calls, because I just have to be within close proximity, because your phone is designed to connect to the strongest cellular signal in the area. Well, if I'm standing 15 feet away from you, I can guarantee that I'm going to get the strongest signal. You're going to talk to me, and I'm going to take that data. We should recognize that the ability to steal that is no longer theoretical. You might spend money on a hobby. Michelle, you might buy running shoes because running is your thing. You might go out to the theater. You might like to go on vacations. Right? You might like to go to the spa. Imagine being gone for a week into a nice, sunny, warm place far away from snow. How much are you going to spend on that vacation? Maybe $3,000, $4,000? Right? I mean, I'm saying you're going to live it. Hi, I'm a bad guy. You know what my hobby is? New tech equipment. I'm going to spend $1,000 buying a new little cell phone tower. And it's not that hard of a stretch, right? Some people buy golf clubs. I buy a computer. Some people, will send themselves out to a retreat. I'm going to spend $600 and hack a new phone, right? It's been professionalized. This is what people focus on. At our events, there is a way to monitor the space to make sure no one turns up a rogue cell phone tower. And that's what we have to talk about. And that's what we should be asking our security people. And if people aren't prepared to do that, great, let's find someone who is. Because the first time someone stands up a cell phone tower and starts stealing data, it's bad. Jeff Bezos, the head of Amazon, he was in the Galapagos Islands. Now, Amazon's a pretty big company. He was in the Galapagos Islands when he had a gallbladder attack. He had to be helicoptered off so he could go somewhere to a hospital. It was broadcast all over CNN's news site when that happened. You don't think insiders and attackers want to know what he is doing? He has a way of shaping businesses, right? So people like that are targeted. So when we have events where we bring 1,000 like-minded people together, that's a target-rich environment to start stealing data. Industrial espionage, believe it or not, happens. We think it's a bad thing, a dirty thing. I attended an intelligence conference in London where I was speaking on computer forensics, and someone came over. He was from Geneva, and he said, I'm letting you know I am paid for a living to get corporate data from other companies. I will ask questions, and I will social engineer, and I will get people to give it up, and I will record phone calls because that's the way business is done. It's very aggressive. And we have this sense in the United States and North America that that's wrong. But in other parts of the world, that's the cost of doing business. We should know people want to steal that data. Our reputation is on the line when it happens at our event, and we have to protect ourselves. I mean, we want to protect our guests, but we also have to protect ourselves, and we have to limit liability.
So, Michael, I'm going to skip beacons because you said we shouldn't really worry too much about beacons, but I'd like to focus on hackathons. That's sort of one of the things that you think that we do that's a little bit crazy. And a lot of
hackathons are great. So we run conferences and seminars and events, and we bring people together, and we give them a contest, and bring your laptop, bring your development skills, and we have people do challenges, right? Because we make our events really interactive, and they're fun. It happens at conferences like DEF CON where we do Capture the Flag, but it's happened in other events in San Francisco, Seattle, Washington, New York, where we bring the hacking community out from their dark rooms, right? They see the light of day for a minute, it scares them, and they bring their laptops and we give them a challenge to hack, and it makes things fun and exciting. But we have to be really careful about that because hackers will not stop at the boundaries of our contest. It's kind of like if we were to pick up a handful of termites, we were to give them a whole bunch of paper, and we drop the termites and the paper in a bowl, and we watch the termites start eating the paper. It's very weird. And then all of a sudden the termites run out of paper. What do? They start eating the bowl. And we're like, hey, you're not supposed to eat the bowl. Stop that. That's the boundary. You're only supposed to eat the paper. When we run hackathons, we should be prepared for the hackers to say, yeah, your contest, that's not as interesting. I can hack the hotel. I can hack the infrastructure. I can hack my neighbor. I can hack anything that moves, right? Because I'm curious and I am a man of misdirected energy. There are people like that. And we should know that hackathons carry an inherent risk. What happens if they hack the hotel? What happens if they hack the convention center and they set off the fire alarm? You're going to have a bad day, and it's not going to end well for anyone. What happens when they hack the lights in a room because all the environmental controls are now hooked up to the internet, and we can turn the lights on and off? Hey, look, I can make a light blink. Hey, look, I can set off the fire alarm. Hey, I can turn the projectors in the room that are all wireless. I can turn them on and off. Right? So please don't think that at a hackathon, hackers will only hack the contest. They will start breaking out of the box and hacking anything they can get access to. They're like that. That's not a bad thing. We just have to know that that's going to happen.
So it goes without saying anything hooked up to the internet, like AV installations, are vulnerable. So you kind of mentioned that. And I guess that we have to have diligence around third-party service contractors, right?
Yeah, we should be talking to our third-party service contractors. They are our business partners, right? And I know we trust them and we like them and we network with them and we get good relationships with them, but we will have to protect ourselves and we have to find out what they're doing. Right? What are the AV people doing? If you have a computer lab set up and people are bringing in laptops for you because you don't have your own and they're about to set up 20, what are they doing to protect the laptops? People are setting up kiosks? Great. Have you scanned them to make sure there's no vulnerabilities? Have you locked down the USB ports so people can't plug it in? What are our third parties doing to help secure our event? And we should ask that. And we should consider doing a review with our third, right? We do on-site surveys all the time. We go out to food tastings. Why? Because we want to know what the quality of food is going to be like. We want to know what the event is like. We should also be doing the same thing with people who do AV equipment, wireless equipment, and computers. We should be looking to find out what they're doing to secure it, and we should think of that as part of our site survey.
Mm-hmm. So I want to jump to some specific questions also that I got, and it's appropriate now because they are third-party service contractors. Again, it's sort of around mobile apps, and then we'll wrap up with some sort of summary and where we go from here. But first of all, do you think there's actually a need to put highly sensitive data on an app?
I think we should be very careful when we start talking about highly sensitive data. And highly sensitive data can be, sure, credit card information. It can be dates of birth, right? It can be all of that contact information when we put it together. And if we're storing that in apps, we should ask ourselves why. I mean, maybe we want to use it, maybe we have a need to use it, and that's fine. If that's the case, then we have to make sure we protect it. But if we're starting to store that information and we're sitting there thinking, well, it's a good idea, we could use it later, we might want to stop and ask ourselves the question of why are we doing that and how will we protect it? And if you don't like those questions, ask that one last question. What happens if a bad guy gets it? How bad is my day going to get? So that's what we should be doing with our third-party vendors and securing that sensitive data. We should start by asking the question. And if the answer comes back, I don't know, or I don't need to worry about it, I'm going to suggest that you're doing business with the wrong person.
So it brings up, the issue of sort of compliance and certifications and whether planners are willing to actually pursue security clearance for their app. Should event technology vendors aim for compliance and certifications, and if so, which ones?
Yeah, that's a really hard question because there isn't a lot in terms of certification for security. I mean, the credit card payment industry has done a really good job about what we should be doing to protect credit card information, right? But when it comes to other registration data and other information about our attendees, we haven't been really great in protecting. We know that there's HIPAA, and that protects health-related information, right? But we also know that there's credit card information. We also know that there's personal identifiable information, and there's different standards out there. They're government standards, right? The National Institute of Standards and Technology had some of it. The Department of Commerce had some of it. But we're not going to find really good certifications. Now, if we have mobile app developers and website developers, we should ask them, to what standards are you encrypting and protecting our data? And they should be able to tell you what standards they're using. But as far as accreditation and certification goes, it's a little vague, which is probably going to hurt us in the long run until that gets standardized and set up.
There is a standard that has been kind of going around and being discussed in event apps issued by Veracode. And have you ever heard of that, or is that?
I know there's stuff out there by Veracode. There are things out there by VeriSign. There are different things that are being done. Until it's industry approved and it's not done by just a small subset, it's useful. It is better than nothing, but I still think that we have a ways to go in the industry.
So what tips can you give event technology vendors to facilitate discussions around security with customers? It's got to be an uncomfortable, weird exchange.
It is. It's like that first date you have with someone where you're sitting there and things are very awkward and there are questions you have in the back of your mind and you're afraid to ask it. Right? So it's like date night, and it gets very weird. Right? It's also like that job interview when you're sitting there asking questions saying, when do I bring up the question of salary? I know that's really awkward. Or when do I bring up the question about paid time off? Right? And you're afraid to bring it up too soon, and you're hoping they bring it off, and people want to dance around the subject. Well, with security in our events, we shouldn't be shy. It's not a bad thing to ask these questions, and we should be asking the questions more up front than at the end. We started this, conversation that we were having today with the statement that how secure and safe are our events, and security doesn't happen by accident. If we ask the question at the very end and we think of it as an afterthought, we're going to be putting ourselves at a disadvantage. We should be asking the questions up front. How are we securing it? What data are we collecting, and how are we securing it? How are we securing transmissions? What are we encrypting? What are we locking down, right, in terms of kiosk registrations? How do we physically protect the event, and how do we monitor to make sure nothing is being set up? And we should run the gamut. We should have a checklist in place, right, in terms of what we want to go through, and we should be able to ask the questions. And if the facility isn't prepared to offer that security, we may have to outsource it. And that's the price it's going to be to do business. We outsource other things. We may have to do it here, too. So let's have the conversation.
As a good professional hacker, is there anything that stands out in your mind in terms of what would be considered good event technology, a good event technology vendor regarding cybersecurity? What makes you think, these guys they know what they're doing?
Oh, there's a lot of things that happen. One, networks shouldn't be wide open. When I go to a conference and I see a network wide open where anyone can hop on at any time, that makes me really nervous. It makes me think that people haven't thought about security. So we should be locking it down. We should make sure, people have to authenticate to get on the network, and we tell them to use encrypted data. That makes me feel better. When I go to register and people are monitoring the kiosks, right? When people show up to your events and they're there for legitimate reasons, and the room monitors and the kiosk personnel come up to them and say, "Hi, is there anything I can help you with?" And that is usually received so well. It makes the bad guys uncomfortable. It's kind of like shoplifters. Shoplifters. They go into stores, they steal stuff, they drive up the price for everyone else. And what happens when you have really good customer service at stores? It makes customers want to come back, but it also deters shoplifters. They want to go away. Why are you being so nosy? I'm not making sure everything's going well. Right? We should also train our room monitors to have a watchful eye. We should train the people who monitor kiosks, not just to help people answer questions, but to make sure no one's inserting devices into our laptops and kiosks. We should be checking these things. Right? The moment I see the best event I went to, I saw someone actually monitoring the wireless network. And this individual, he wasn't causing a big scene, but he had a big antenna sticking out of his bag, and he was walking around just scanning the floor. And I got a sense that, hey, this organization's doing the right thing. Right? One, it's a deterrent, but two, it also gives you the sense that if there's an issue, they're ready to respond, as opposed to people who do nothing. We don't want to be the people who do nothing.
So, because we're short on time and a lot of questions have come in, just in our conversations that you and I have had on a couple of occasions and what you've shared with us today, this is kind of like an overall summary. I'm just going to run through them. But at the end of the list, let me know if anything, if I missed anything or there's anything that you want to comment on. So obviously, the organizers as well as the third-party service providers have to develop some sort of security posture. And we need to be keeping our attendees, our exhibitors, our sponsors really informed, especially if there are data breaches. We need to have someone, perhaps the venue or a professional security company, search for these rogue routers, the Pineapple and the fake cell tower and all that stuff. We need to make sure that vendors don't send logins in the clear. You might want to comment on that. Do vulnerability scans, prevent devices. Everyone should wipe out that auto-connect feature on their phone so that you don't reconnect to a fake Starbucks, and bring in a third-party professional if this is more than you can handle. But talk about logins in the clear.
Yeah, logins in the clear. Wow. Whenever we send in our names and passwords to log in somewhere, if that password is not encrypted, I think we're at the stage where we're asking for trouble. We really are. And if we can get by, once or twice today, it doesn't mean we're always going to get by. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Even when people come in and set up their own networks and they stand them up, right, because we don't like the conference facility, so we stand up our own wireless, network, and people are going to talk to our network rather than the one at the hotel or the convention center, we still have the same risks because I can impersonate them. Right? So the moment we start sending data that's not encrypted, it's a matter of time until someone just grabs it. And that's going to be kind of a bad day for us because it'll take us a while to figure out that our names and passwords have been stolen, and by that point, people have logged in and done all sorts of things. Remember, people like to reuse passwords. So if I know your email address and I know your password for one system, chances are you use that same email address on LinkedIn, and you use that same email address on Facebook, and you use that same email address, when you go to your credit card company, or maybe you use the same user ID, but you use the same password, right? So I can start going in over and over and over and start accessing more and more systems. And that's the real danger of starting to send stuff in the clear, because we reuse data. We are, and I hate to say this because it's going to sound awful, we are inherently lazy. Right? We want it to be easy, and we have to know that every time we reuse that stuff and we try to make it a matter of convenience for us, we make it easier for the bad guys.
So finally, I want to get to a couple of questions. I want everyone to know that we may go a little bit over, if Michael, if you would indulge us, because there's a lot of good stuff. And first question is HTTPS enough to mitigate the pineapple issue?
It definitely helps by a great deal. However, you might notice that in the news there is a certain airline that was providing Wi-Fi access, and people were using HTTPS, and the airline was actually setting up a little man-in-the-middle situation where they were passing off bad certificates, and essentially the airline was acting like a man-in-the-middle attack, so they got the data, they could decrypt anything. So HTTPS helps a great deal, but if I stand up in the middle, some websites will revert from HTTPS and go automatically back down to HTTP. That little S in that secure goes away, right? And it happens automatically, so we should know if that stuff happens. So it's good. It's even really good, but it's not perfect.
So does your mobile app encrypt data maybe automatically so people with pineapple routers can't intercept it? Obviously, it must not be automatic, but how would you address that kind of question?
It depends on the mobile app developer. They are in control as to whether or not things are encrypted when it comes and goes. Right? Mobile apps can be developed very fast. It's quick. We're talking days and weeks rather than months and years. Right? So we can set up apps for events and conferences and things like that. So if the developers rushed it and didn't secure the data or didn't force it to use encryption, it won't. So it's really up to the mobile app designer, and we may not know, right, as a user, whether or not things were encrypted or not. We can monitor for HTTPS and HTTP when we look at our browser, but we actually have to be looking for it. But if I put up a bad certificate, what do? When you see an error message that pops up on your browser that there's a problem going to a website, what do? I won't just make the message go away. I need to go to my website to keep doing what I'm doing. I have to buy my fuse, right? So we've gotten in the habit of we're going to click to make error messages go away because it's interfering with what I want to do. So we're our own worst enemy at times. It's so sad.
So you mentioned published standards around security. Are you talking about NIST standards, or what were you referring to, and where can we find those?
There's a whole bunch of standards that are out there. So when it comes to credit card information, and everyone likes to hone in on credit card information because we steal that, right? We know that the payment card industry has certain standards in place, PCI. And if we're not in compliance with that, they can charge us higher rates, or they can deny our ability to use credit cards. When it comes to encryption standards, it depends on the mobile app, right? The government likes to use FIPS 140.2 for encryption standards, right? So the National Institute of Standards and Technology has a number of standards out there. We can start looking there, right? There's a number of standards out there. Sure, there's mobile app standards. We can look at it, sure, and we can ask people if they're compliant and see if they're at that level or higher. But let's start the question by asking them, to what standard are they complying? and then we can take it from there. If they say none, you might want to stop and go,
Mm-hmm. Well, here's a very specific question. How does a mobile app provider ensure encryption at rest on the server side if the user doesn't password protect their device?
Okay, so I heard what sounded like two issues in the same question, so I'm going to split that up for just a second. The first thing is most mobile apps, if they're storing data locally, will store it in little databases called SQL-like databases. They're small, flexible, and fast. That information should be encrypted on the phone. So when it's stored at the phone and we're not doing anything with it, it's just sitting there. That's called at rest. We should make sure that little database is protected. That's the first thing. Now, if we don't have to enter a password to get into the database, well, encryption doesn't do us any good, does it? Right? That means anyone can get in. The second thing is when we send data back to a website where data is in transit, that should be using HTTPS or SSL or some type of encryption over the air. And then lastly, we have to go back to the vendor and say, hey, if you're hosting this on your website, are you encrypting the database on your side? So it's encrypted back there at rest. So we want to make sure we have encryption in all three spots. On the phone, when it's at rest. On the server, when it's in rest. And when it's in the air and in transit.
Michael, do you believe that facilities and hotels have a legitimate claim to restrict Wi-Fi devices and, small private networks for security reasons?
Wow. Yeah, so I've been watching the news on that too. Boy, that got to be a very expensive lawsuit very fast. So here's the deal. Whether or not a hotel thinks it's legitimate or not, there's a little organization called the FCC. And the FCC has said, you know what? Consumers have paid to use their Wi-Fi, their cell phones, and they're paid to use that spectrum. And if you deny them access to it, it's wrong. And we're going to make you pay for it. Now, sure, if I bring in 10 Wi-Fis into your conference and I put them all within 10 feet of the wireless access point that is servicing the room, essentially I can jam that whole area, all being within proximity, right? And it can really hurt and take down the event. I was at an event where the local infrastructure, right, the conference was running it, they had a problem, and everyone started standing up their MiFis. And they stood up all these MiFis at the same time, and you had 300 people in a room, and they're all sitting within close proximity to one another. They almost saturated the entire bandwidth. It wasn't until everyone broke for lunch that they were able to reset the entire system because everyone had flooded the space with their own MiFis. Yeah, that's a risk we have, and that's going to show up. And the facility could say, you know what, we can ban MiFis. I don't think you'll be able to actually ban MiFis, and you won't be able to ban people from tethering to their phones because, let's face it, when you've given instruction to your attendees and you've said it like 18 times and people still ignore what you say, you sit there and wonder to yourselves, what were you thinking? Well, this is the same situation, right? Users, attendees, they will do what they do, right? So whether or not we think we have a right to ban them or not, it's not going to stop them from doing it. So unfortunately, hotels have to find a different way around that, and there is a different way around that. We have to make sure that we are spreading our wireless access points out enough. We rotate the frequencies and channels, and that way if there's saturation in one area, it doesn't take down the entire network. Right? Wireless access points typically in the United States run on 11 different channels. Let's spread it out. Let's make sure we reuse the channels appropriately. And that usually takes a wireless engineer to come in for a couple hours, survey the space, and make recommendations and fine-tune it. And then, if there's a problem, we should be able to react on the fly. If we notice that there's a problem over here, we may have to disrupt service for 3 minutes as we reset our access point to reassign it in a new portion of the spectrum so things aren't jammed. But we should be ready to respond like that. If there was a fire, we would respond pretty quickly. If there were protesters, we'd be able to respond pretty quickly. Hey, let's do the same thing here. We're just not at that stage yet, and we haven't asked ourselves those questions. We need to.
So here's kind of a related topic. Wasn't Native supposed to address the need for Wi-Fi at events? Or he says, was that just a dream I had?
It was a dream. What were you thinking?
So there you go.
It was go ahead. Right, so you have to have a sense of humor about all this. And yes, it was, sure, it never worked out the way it was supposed to. And it was supposed to address all that, but clearly it didn't. So we have to find better ways. And there are better ways out there. We need smart people. We need more and more smart people to solve these problems.
So how many events do you go to where the password is shared all over the place in literature, speaker slides, brochures? But you're talking about the encryption password for the network. You're not talking about the access password for attendees. Are those concepts different?
Yeah, it's the same thing, though. So when you have a network and people are going to hop on and they need a password to get on, that password is also used to do the encryption back and forth to that wireless network, right, because it's secure. But if everyone's using the exact same password, well, then you've given the bad guy the password to log onto the network and to identify all the encrypted traffic. And I go to a lot of conferences. I still think conferences are the way to go because people can interact and people can share ideas that just don't always work over the phone. So I still believe that that's the place to go. But more and more I go to them where it's in the program guide, they put it up on the wall. When you go to sign in and register, it's sitting there. I mean, it's all over the place so people can hop on the network. The problem is we're giving everyone the exact same password every day for 5 days in a row. You know, I don't have to be in the room to attack your conference. And we have to remember that, right, we're not talking about physical security anymore. I can go right outside your building, and I can still have access to your wireless network, and I can still see the wireless traffic from your users. And if I'm sitting there on the sidewalk or I'm right next door at the coffee shop, you'll never see me. You'll see my wireless traffic if you're looking for it, but I'm not physically in your space. Isn't that scary? That I can be right across the street, or I can be right upstairs in the hotel, or I can be across the hall in the lobby, which means now we have bad guys who don't have to physically walk in, right? We've protected our events more and more by making sure we don't have people sneak in without paying. Okay, I don't have to pay. I'm going to sit right outside in the lobby, and I'm going to watch people come and go. Right? By the way, when you see me coming at events, usually the antenna in my bag is about 3 feet long, which means I would
run if I saw you coming.
So I went to an event in New York, and this was great. And this is only going to take a second, and I know we're running late. I went to New York, and they had NYPD providing a lot of security for the event at certain exterior points, along with private security. So they had their police force there. I had my backpack, and I had an antenna sticking way out the back. And I go up, and I sit literally right next to a cop. So, I mean, I'm talking like 3 feet. And he looks over at me, and he was on break, and he was going to start his duty, and I happened to be there early, and he was there early. And I looked at him square in the eye, and I said, hey. And he looks at me and goes, hey. And I pull out my laptop and I hook up the antenna. I'm doing work. And he looks at me. He sees this antenna. He goes, that's a big antenna. And I said, it is. I don't always get good service, so I'm sure to carry my own. He goes, good thinking. He packed up his newspaper and away he went.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's kind of scary. So, I mean, people a lot of times, even though they'll see something like that, they won't stop to think. Now, had I pulled out a gun or a bomb, he would have been all over me. And he'd have me on the floor with his knee in my back. But what did I do? I pulled out a laptop and a big antenna. So people don't run when they see me coming. They usually, oh, wow, you're a geek. Yes, I am.
Cool. Last question. For my healthcare clients, their data breaches are about evenly split. 1/3 human error, 1/3 tech glitch, and 1/3 malicious hacker. Sounds like a Jeopardy question. As we come up with a plan for my event clients, do you know of any similar stats on event data breaches to help us prioritize our efforts?
Okay, so I'm going to redefine the question just a little because I think it'll be more fun with this answer. I have been working with data breaches and attacks on networks, not just in the event industry, but also in corporate industry as well. And I can tell you that the vast majority of attacks occur due to spear phishing attacks, really well-crafted emails that are designed to get users to click on links and give up information. between 10 and 20% of all individuals will click on that link or give up information. They believe there is $5 million sitting for them in an account in Africa. They believe that there is this place that's selling great pocket watches, and they believe that there is a Canadian pharmacy selling little blue pills. Right? They can't help but click on those links. Right? So 10 to 20% of all users click on that. Now, that means user behavior is responsible for a large number of attacks on our networks. So I think when we said it was 1/3 user error, 1/3 malicious hacks, 1/3, I didn't hear what I can't recall what the lesson was. I think that's skewed. I think it's higher. I think it's around 50 to 60% user error, and I think we have to eliminate that. In terms of hacks, here's the scary thing: once you're targeted and people really want to get in, they're going to come. Because remember, it's been professionalized. That's what they focus on. They are like a dog going for a bone. You know that little dog where you pick up the bone and the dog is still hanging on and won't let go? That's what these folks are like, because they view it as a challenge. Right? That's why hackathons can be so dangerous, because when they focus in, they won't stop. Right? So I think the hacker thing, while we say it's 1/3, I don't think that's going to go away. That's still going to happen. What we have to do is we have to protect ourselves from silly user behavior. If we have a registration kiosk or we have registration terminals, right, and we have the staff there, if they're surfing the internet at the same spot where people are registering and they are collecting information and they're printing up name badges, right, everyone shows up between 7 a.m. and 9 a.m. for the event, and then we have the big keynote session and everyone's in there, right, and all of a sudden registration slows down and our staff monitors are so bored. And, this is where we print out the badges and the names, and, hey, there's internet access. Hey, I can search the web, and I can check my mail. Hey, I can go here. What are we doing? Oh, my gosh, we now just open everything up to whatever they decide to click on, right? So I think our user behavior is not at 33%. I think it's a lot higher. So, I know, make sure people aren't surfing the web from your kiosk and your registration booths and all that.
Well, on that note, I think it's time to close. We could probably go on for hours and be just as scared at the end as we were at the beginning and in the middle. So thank you so much for helping us bring this really important topic to light, Michael. And I had Michael's email address that he supplied us with on the slide right before this. So check back on the webinar and the slide deck to be able to contact Michael directly. And thank you, everyone, for listening. All these webinars, including this one, are recorded, and they will be available in a couple of days on tsnn.com/webinars. And we'd like to also thank our sponsors, Signature Boston and OnStream, for making this webinar possible today. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of the week and a great weekend. Thank you.